I was arrested in 1984 for a gang-related murder that took place in the Wicker Park area, what today is called Bucktown, I'm assuming. I was 17 years old, the victim was 14 years old, and it was a gang fight that took place between me and I was about to be jumped by a group of, I don't know if you want to know names or anything, but there were a group of vice lords and warlords. I was walking down Milwaukee Avenue. I had a gun on me. Milwaukee Avenue is normally their area. Somebody saw me in that area that I recognized as opposition. I seen him run down a street, Evergreen, and by the time I got to the corner, there was already about a group of 12 to 13 people running towards my direction. I pulled out my gun and I started shooting. See, the funny thing is that when you're 17 on the street, you feel like you're an adult, like, nobody can really tell you nothing, and, you know what you're doing, and you feel like you're your own man. When you're in prison and you're 17 or you're 19, you're about to turn 19, you realize that you're not really that old, as you thought. You're not really the man that you thought you were, and so now that's going to be tested and all that. And so, that was a big something to get used to. Jail was being in a county. 3 months into fighting the murder case, my mother was involved in a car accident where she lost her life and the driver lost her life, and 2 other members of my family were critically injured, and I was not allowed to go to the funeral simply because I was fighting a murder and I wasn't convicted yet, so I was never allowed to pay my last respects. In fact, I didn't even get to see her grave until I was released 20 years later, that I was able to go to the grave site. That was my worst year. I had a lot of worse years, but that was like maybe my worst. I mean, of course, fear. The fact that, the realization that you're not going to see the streets again goes through your mind. The fear that you've never been in prison before, you don't know what's expected. You heard all these stories about prison and all that. That was my first case. Okay. So, what I'm saying? I've always heard stories about prison because, of course, family members of mine have been in prison already. But it's never quite the same as you actually being there. But the fear of going to prison was going through my mind, of what to expect. I didn't know what to expect, what was going to happen. Niggas were going to try me, all that goes through your mind. How you got to tell that to your family, what I'm saying? I work currently for ALSO, which is the Alliance of Local Services Organization, and they're the ones that do the hiring for the program, the campaign called CeaseFire, which is a campaign that's to end the cycle of violence in the city of Chicago and throughout Illinois. I was introduced to CeaseFire through some of the associations that I made while in prison. Some of the other members that were ex-gang members that were in prison that came out before me was already involved in CeaseFire. And so when I was released, I ran into some of those guys, and they're the ones that said, man, I think you'd be a good person to come work for us. We're going to give you an interview, see if you can come through. I went through, I volunteered for like 6 months by just showing up to events, to marches, to responses. And then 6 months later, when they had openings, I threw an application in there. They helped me do an application. I put an application in, I went through an interview process, and they hired me. And so I've been working for ALSO and CeaseFire now for a little bit over 3.5 years now.